I just walked into the doorway of a sushi shop to buy some lunch, and it was within no more than 5-10 seconds, literally, that it just started, and bricks and masonry came in, and it was, I you couldn't even see outside because it was just thick dust. It was just white. I wasn't even aware of really what damage there had been done, really. And then one day, I just had this major breakdown.
Well, hello there, and how are you today? I hope all is well in your world. It's a beautiful day here in Sydney, and I'm delighted. My guest today is Alan Cox, and Alan is fellow Brit. We grew up not too far away from each other, and Alan's now based in New Zealand and is the founder of Kimbo, which is a really cool mental health and mental well-being app, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a little bit. But Alan, hello, good to see you. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Cool. So let's start. So you're in New Zealand. So I think it's Christchurch.
Yep, in Christchurch. Been here 21 years. Arrived just before the millennium. So yeah, remember that time well.
Wow, it's scary to think that 21 years since the millennium. I think 2000 doesn't feel that long ago, but wow, 21 years. So, but you grew up in London and spent your time there. So, what actually brought you from the far shores of the UK to New Zealand? What was your journey?
I think there's probably a couple of drivers. I think, I didn't really realize it at the time, but one of the kind of the underlying issues that I think that I was in some ways running away from was that I'd had a bit of a poor upbringing as a child, and there was still kind of residual issues there with my mum, basically. And the job that I had at the time involved me going over to California a couple of times, and I had to stay there quite a lot of time in a work setting, and I really got to see you're working to live rather than living to work, and the first time I went out there, I went back to my wife and said, "Oh my God, you should come and see this. It's amazing. Let's look at going over there." Then they sent me a second time and paid for my wife to come over, and she got to see it for herself. And yeah, it was just really there was just like the cultural difference of not spending every kind of hour of your life basically thinking about work. I remember if I wasn't seen on a Saturday, I would be frowned upon on a Monday, and yeah, so that was kind of the catalyst, really.
Okay, wow. And just kind of rolling forward, because I know just whenever you hear of Christchurch, of course, one of the things that Christchurch has become famous for, of course, is the earthquake. And I know you were there during that time. But just talk to us about that experience, what it was like, and being there, what happened to you personally, because I know it had a huge impact on your life.
Yeah, well, there'd already been a fairly big earthquake the September before the big one, and in a way that was kind of quite a major event because up until that point we'd hardly felt a tremor. I remember once one of our good friends phoned us up and said, "Did you feel that earthquake?" And no, we didn't. And so it really, earthquakes just weren't a thing, right? And I think in the September one, there was a few old buildings that kind of got damaged, but it was pretty much not a major event, although it was like very, very, I remember it well, very, very scary when it happened. But the February event really couldn't have come at a worse time, really. It was really just around, just after lunchtime. Lots and lots of people out on the streets, struck pretty much in the middle of Christchurch. And our offices was just, I don't know if you know, but the Canterbury Television Building, or the CTV building, is the one that came down that had most of the deaths, and that was literally just kind of opposite our building. So just seeing all of the horror of that was pretty terrible, you know. And it's hard, it's just hard to describe. You know, you've just got, you know, if you've ever seen pictures of, like, say, the 9/11, when, like, the buildings come down, you've got people just walking around in a daze, covered in. It was kind of like that. My personal experience was that there was a very old part of town, and, you know, literally I just walked into the doorway of a sushi shop to buy some lunch, and it was within no more than 5-10 seconds, literally, that it just started, and, you know, bricks and masonry came in, and it was, yeah, you couldn't even see outside because it was just thick dust. It was just white, you know. And at the time, you just run on adrenaline, right? You just want, you know, I'm thinking about my wife and my kids, and, you know, where the hell are they, and all that. You just work on autopilot, right? And I remember coming outside of the building, and it was just, there was about like 2 or 3 feet of bricks on the floor, and you couldn't see them. I was just scrabbled over those, and it wasn't really until the next day that I saw pictures of where I was, and just where the doorway was, just across from that, there was a car that was basically crushed to about half of its height. It was kind of when I saw that, that it really dawned on me, and, like, really hit me what, you know, just how close I'd come, kind of thing. So I wasn't kind of injured as such, you know, but it was a horrible experience. Wouldn't want to go through that again.
But what happened then? So that kind of, I mean, an extreme experience obviously has an impact on anybody who's going to go through that. So, but after that, and the recovery for you personally, because what happened with the business and, like, your life, what did you do to recover and to come to terms with that disaster?
Yeah, I was a business owner with 12 or 13 staff, right? And your first kind of reaction is, like, I've just got to, your mind isn't on yourself. It's just kind of, you know, in my case, I was just thinking, how do I protect their livelihoods? How do I, you know, and we couldn't get into our building, we couldn't get our servers. So there was, like, about 2 or 3 months of a lot of struggle just to get up and running again, really. And you know, in hindsight, you know, at the same time, people that weren't in a leadership position like myself and had gone through what I had gone through probably wouldn't have even been at work. They would have, like, phoned up and said, look, I can't, you know, and that was the norm for many people. They said, look, I just can't come into work. And then there's many people that didn't return to work for 6 months, 12 months. But I guess in hindsight, what I was basically doing was ignore, you know, I wasn't even ignoring it. I wasn't even aware of really what damage there had been done, really. And then one day, I just had this major breakdown, right? And I had no idea prior to that what a mental breakdown was. And, you know, the way I kind of explain it to people now is that your brain kind of has to shut down to a degree all the parts that it doesn't really need in order to survive. You know, it's getting so damaged that it basically says, look, I'm not going to let you operate anymore. And in my case, I couldn't walk for more than about 20 yards. My speech was slurred like I'd had a stroke. And I was only functionally awake for about an hour or two a day. You know, I was just in bed the whole time. And yeah, so that was probably the darkest time of my life, you know. Yeah.
How long after the earthquake did that occur?
That was probably about 3 months.
3 months. Okay, so you kind of had this earthquake, and then you tried to almost operate like normal and just kind of continue protecting the staff and running the business, and then, you know, suddenly the body, I guess, had other ideas, and it just kind of shut down and forced you to. So how did you come back from that? And did you, like, how did you recover from that? So once you could only function for 1 hour a day, clearly there's a limitation of what you could do. But what was your what did you do? How did you find the support that helped you to recover?
Yeah, I think I've got a bit of an unusual story there, in the sense that because of the severity of my breakdown, you know, I was under the care of, I forget what they call it now, like the crisis team or whatever, and they basically took some time to say, look, you've got to kind of adjust yourself to understanding that it's going to be probably at least a year before you can be back at work. And one day, it was probably maybe 2 months after my breakdown, I just hadn't progressed at all, or not much anyway. I remember I was just sobbing a lot of the time, and for whatever reason, you know, I don't know if it was just serendipity or whatever, but there was a program came on the TV called The Truth About Depression, and it's a program by the BBC, and I think it's still available online for free, like on YouTube actually. And I do always encourage anyone to watch it, really, whether they are depressed or not. That was a big turning point for me, because prior to that, watching that program, I basically had the mindset that I'm just one of those unlucky people with a fucked up brain, and there is no hope for me. And I just couldn't see any way out whatsoever.
Right.
And in terms of like where I was with my kind of mood and things like that, you know, it was just completely, you know, you have these like images of it being in a grey cloud. Like, this was just complete darkness, you know, like if I was in a tunnel, I wouldn't know which end was which, you know. And that, watching that program did a couple of really important things for me. One was that it showed me that, yes, what's going on is in my head, but there's actually kind of mechanical, chemical things that are causing that stuff. And it's not just like it was almost like, for me, that it was an imaginary illness, right? And what this program showed me is it's not actually imaginary at all. You know, it showed that because of what I've been through, my hippocampus would have been, you know, shrunk by 20%. I would have had, you know, all of my neurological pathways would have developed in a way that are just not helpful to me. Over many years, I would have laid down many beliefs about me and the world that aren't helpful for me. There have been chemicals in my brain that are doing all kinds of things. So that was one thing. But the other important thing is it showed that all of that stuff is reversible. You know, it's yeah. So that was really like the big
Wow.
turning point for me. It was like even if it was a chink of light, a chink of light came on at the end of the tunnel that kind of gave me hope, right?
Okay.
And that was really the start of my journey.
That's such an interesting story. It shows the power, doesn't it, of getting the right information at the right time, because you had a whole, I guess, belief system about your current situation and that kind of sense of helplessness, and there's no way out of this. And then just watching something that gave you information, but in a way that connected with you, started that journey. I've heard that so many times. It's really it comes at it comes just when you need it, and it feels like you had been like pretty, you're pretty down at that point, in terms of,
I'm not proud of it, but I mean, there'd been, multiple suicide attempts at that time, and I'm obviously very, very thankful that I wasn't successful. But that's how bad it was.
You're as low as you can get. You just didn't want to. You just didn't want to be here in terms of pain. So tell us what happened next, then. So from that point, from that part in your life, so we understand the earthquake and the devastation that caused, and the impact that had on you personally, and then the mental breakdown, the feeling of desperation, and then the sense of hope that came along simply by watching a program, watching a documentary. So what did you do next? How did you get through and start on that journey to where you are now?
I think the main thing I did was basically I became basically interested in learning as much as I could. I just read up on literally everything. And actually, that's another important point. Because of how I was, I couldn't even read a paragraph without forgetting what I just read. So I couldn't actually read anything, right? So I actually turned to YouTube, and I was just consuming all of this content, everything from, Taoism, Buddhism, neuroscience, the effect of cold showers on depressed people.
Right. Okay. So you were really opening your mind to knowledge and really learning about all of these different concepts. And
and I do remember coming across well researched material, like with research papers, and then my clinicians would come around to check up on me and what have you, and I would tell them about this stuff, and they didn't even know it, right? And
well, they've been trained in a particular
that's right,
protocol methodology. Okay.
That's
so,
right.
So what connected with you the most, and out of that whole wide range of content, what really connected with you that really helped you embrace?
So one thing I did, and if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of just jump back to your previous question of like what I did. When I was on these YouTube channels, do you know how they come up with all the suggestions? Sort of thing? You're watching that one, it gives you all the other ideas.
Watch all day.
I noticed some of these videos that had been created, and I would best describe them as kind of motivational compilations, right? And these people, I think like Mulligan Brothers is one of the people that does it. they basically take all of these snippets of people saying stuff, you know, it could be Anthony Robbins, you know, Wayne Dwyer, all kinds of people. They put all of this imagery to it, you know, video imagery, and this really emotive music and sounds. And I started watching some of these, and they really resonated with me. But some things didn't. And I remember, so basically what I did is I ripped them to MP3. I cut out all the bits that I didn't like. And when my wife went off to work in the morning and I had to go back to bed, I would put my headphones on, press play. Within 5 minutes, I'll be off to sleep. And this content is playing, right? And I would just do that every day. And within a few weeks, I noticed myself feeling lighter and I started feeling better. And the other thing that was really what I also noticed was, even though and this is kind of where it gets a little bit weird, even though I wasn't consciously listening to much of the material because I was asleep, what I found is when certain situations happened, where I would normally have a certain emotion or think a certain way that's not helpful, I would have this new stuff coming forward, right? Maybe someone would pull across me in the car or something, and normally I'd get angry. I, may even on the hooter and that kind of thing. But I just noticed myself starting to go, oh, actually, that person might not have seen me. Right. And it was a real change. And
how interesting. Yeah.
So I to cut a long story short, I just kept on playing this stuff whenever I could. And I was back to work within like 3 months. And my care workers said, like, what have you done? Because like, it doesn't make sense. You shouldn't be
at least a year. Wow, that's amazing. So you almost immersed yourself in a new way of thinking, and just played it consistently until I guess it changed your view of the world, the lens, your belief system.
And that was kind of really important for me, because I remember trying all of these. I'm a techie, right? So the way my mind was, I certainly couldn't do things like meditation, right? Like, I was just so much in the bottom of the tornado, I couldn't do that, right? And a lot of these other apps that I was either recommended or downloaded, they kind of demanded too much of me. But this was a way that I didn't have to do anything, like literally just listen. And so like in answer to your question of like what was the change, I think a lot of the change was kind of done for me.
Because of that. Were you taking medication as well, like antidepressants?
Yeah, I was on antidepressants. Yeah.
Okay, so you're on antidepressants, you were listening to content, you were using YouTube as a resource, content that resonated with you. You created your own playlist effectively, and then you listened to that consistently until those words became part of you, and then you started to notice a change, and then you were back at working through it. Wow, it's amazing. So thank you for sharing that journey. And then like to just bring it to the present, what happened? Because now you've built an app, you're helping other people who are also going through, and there's a lot of people who are going through struggles at this time. So what then led to you developing your own mental health app?
Well, I had been involved in a number of other like startups and jobs and things, and I just come to like a transition, I guess, where it was kind of like, what do I do next? And I've pretty much always worked for myself. And at that particular time that I was kind of thinking what to do next, there was an increasing awareness, both for me and in the media, of, you know, just how bad things were getting with mental health. You know, there was, you know, some well-known people like Avicii and, you know, Anthony Bourdain committed suicide, and there's a whole bunch of others of well-known people. I think at that time I thought, no, I'm going to do something about this. So I think it had been a good like 5 years since my recovery, and just in terms of kind of just taking a bit of a data-centric view for a moment, when you look at the data, if you think of, say, 10, you're the best well-being you can possibly be, and 1 is like you're, you know, say suicidal or something. Most people, like average people, if you like, they're only like a 5 or 6, right? Most people just don't realize that they've got so much growth in front of them. And I had got myself, by, you know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I'd got myself to a point where I genuinely think that I was probably like a 7 or an 8. You know, it would take a lot to, you know, very hardly anything can stress me now. And so I just knew the power of basically becoming mentally fitter, if you like, you know, developing that mental strength. And I just had a hypothesis, you know, based on how I had got back to well-being. I had a hypothesis of how I could create an app that was in a way similar, you know, like all you have to do is listen. It doesn't, you know, you don't have to take time out of your day. You can play it in the car or while you're sleeping. But something that had like a lot more science behind it in terms of, you know, the content and the methodology and what have you. So I basically researched that for about a year. And then I took my proposals to some leading clinicians in the field. And to be honest, I was expecting to get shot down. But I was really pleasantly surprised that they said, yep, it's, you know, that, you know, all these things, you know, I formed a hypothesis of all these different things that were at play in my recovery. You know, like there was education, there was repetition theory, there was psychoacoustics, there was subliminal theory, there's a whole bunch of different things there. It wasn't just one thing. And yeah, they said, yep, you're pretty much on the money. That's how you would have recovered. And yep, that sounds like a good plan for your app. So I set out, and I've been developing that for when I say I've been developing it, you know, our team has been developing that for 2 years, just over 2 years now. And I couldn't be happier really, because the kinds of stories that we're getting back from people that are using it, you know, ones that have, you know, even been seeing psychologists for like a year, and then they use the app. It's really
it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
I know I've already succeeded in a way.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And the app's called Akimbo. Is it Akimbo? Is that?
It's called Akimbo.
Akimbo,
which is an old English word that refers to the strongest part of an archer's bow.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's called Akimbo. We might actually be going. Well, I say we might, but we are going to be going through a name change shortly, because just some like copyright issues around the name. But it's called Akimbo now.
Okay, all right. Maybe called something different in a while. I love what you say though around, like, because you've got that. extreme experience that you had where on the scale of 1 to 10 you were like 1 at some point, 1, 2, and then you've kind of brought yourself back to a 7, which is amazing, and you're consistently at a 7 through the app. Has anything changed though in your situation? Because I guess what I'm curious to know is, you had an acute traumatic experience in terms of the earthquake, and that triggered a situation. If something like that occurred to you like now, would your recovery be better or different because you've now created, like you've educated yourself, you've supported? Because life events occur to us all, sometimes big events like you've described, other times, smaller events, and it's how we react to those things that really make a difference. We're all about equilibrium, finding equilibrium. And what you described was a big event that really pushed you out of equilibrium, and you remained out of equilibrium for a long while until you found some tools and then started to build your habits around using those tools to find yourself back in equilibrium. So, and let's say many people settle for a 5 or a 6 to be back in equilibrium, but what you're saying is it shouldn't be, we shouldn't settle for that. We should be a 7 or 8, and so that we can do that consistently. And yes, events come along which will push us out of equilibrium, but we don't need to go to that place where you were. We have an opportunity to come back quicker. I think it's around the speed. We're not saying you're not going to get impacted, because of course you are, but it's around that recovery process. And so I'm curious to know whether you've completely changed the way you look at the world and your belief system around those things because of what you've done, which means that's made you more resilient. Which means you bounce back quicker, if you like, or whether it's, I've misunderstood that.
I think there's probably, it's not just one thing. I think, part of being resilient mentally is a very big part of that is physiological, right? So if you are in kind of good mental fitness, you'll have a better kind of chemical composition. You'll have better neurological wiring in your brain. And I'll just give an example of that to make that real, right? So a particular kind of neurological wiring could be that there's a little circuit in your brain that says, when somebody looks at me in a certain way, that basically triggers this pathway that says, be scared of that person because they don't like me, right? And with knowledge, you basically can become to understand, actually, that is probably nowhere near the truth. That's a gross assumption. So if you train your brain to basically not do that, and in fact, if someone looks at you in a bad way, you just literally don't pay any attention to it, those pathways form. And that's just one small example of how you literally rewire your brain to be healthier, so that when things happen to you, like externally, you may not even notice them. I think part of resilience is about strengthening your mindset so that when an event happens, it just doesn't have anywhere near the level of impact, right? But I think the even more important thing that I think is often overlooked is the frequency of things that have an impact on you decreases in proportion to the level of mental fitness. So like I'm I'm in a situation now where, I mean, I work in a co-working space, and people lark about, and they might, you know, come up behind you in the kitchen and go, you know, on your shoulders, and they get frustrated with me because I literally don't react, right? And they go, Jesus, Alan, how do you do that? And you know, I don't mean to. I'm not saying that as a show-off thing. It's just that you do get yourself in a position where things that would normally have brought you down, you don't even notice them anymore.
So it's so interesting. So really, really calm. I'm conscious of time here.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you for a lot longer, but just kind of wrapping it up now. So in terms of your own personal habits and your what I call your own equilibrium toolkit, like what are the habits and practices that you do now to keep yourself in that that state of equilibrium, or at least to get yourself back there when events occur? You know, I'd love to understand what you do now on a consistent basis.
Probably other than I'm just continuously learning, right? I'm always reading new things, but probably in the sense of an actual tool, I taught myself how to do meditation without needing an app, you know, and one of the big things that I do is to kind of do micro meditations just about anytime, anywhere, whenever I need it. You know, I will basically meditate while the traffic lights are changing, right?
Okay. So it's almost like a reset to calm your nervous system.
And I think a big part of that is also really start basically noticing yourself, right? I think one of the big problems that I certainly had before, and I think a lot of people do, is they just push through. You know, they might be tired, they might be, you know, stressed or what have you. I think one of the biggest things that I do nowadays is the moment I notice that I'm starting to drop, I just stop work.
Interesting. So you're much more in tune with your body.
Much more in tune, and you know, like you know, as I say, I'm in a co-working space, and I don't get embarrassed about just, you know, putting my headphones on, I put my sunglasses on in the office.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
I'll just go and do that. You know, it's.
What about things like food and exercise? Did you make any changes in those areas?
I probably not a huge amount. I think I do eat probably healthier than what I did, but I think that's probably still a bit of a journey I'm still on. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. And on the continuous learning, so what are you reading? Like what resources do you consume that really inspire you and uplift you? Because where we are now, and it's an interesting time, interesting might not be the right word to describe it, but it's an interesting time. And I'm talking to you now because right now we're in lockdown here in Sydney, and of course when you look at the news, of course it's very fear-inducing, very almost like dramatic, you know, the way it can come across, which is the opposite to what you're describing, you know, because so I don't know, do you expose yourself to content like that as well, in terms of news that can be very anxiety inducing, or do you find that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I do watch the news every day, and it's something that like one of the things that I've read quite a lot about is stoicism, and I think that's something that's quite misunderstood. You know, I think to be stoic is often perceived as being like lacking emotion and just being not really caring about, you know, or just, you know, that stiff upper lip and all that. But it's not really that at all.
What is Stoicism? And just for people
so basically, Stoicism is basically, I guess, the philosophies of the ancient Greeks. They did all these writings. What was it, Aurelius or what have you? I can't remember their names now, but it's basically, some of these Greek emperors basically would write down their teachings on how I would basically describe it more about how to be a good human,
right?
How to live as a good human, and I've got quite a lot from that. Like, for example, choosing your characteristics. One of the big things that probably comes from Stoicism is that future view. Like if you can imagine people reading out your what's it called, your eulogy, if there was like 3 characteristics that they say, like, Alan was this, this, and this, what would you really like those to be? And once you've basically defined, there's a whole bunch of characteristics, right? But if you basically think, I want to be known as, I was incredibly honest. I always, I was charitable, and I was hardworking, or whatever those 3 things are. You can then start living your life that way, rather than it just being kind of a bit scattergun, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like developing a brand, isn't it? It's like, these are my character qualities. I want to be honest, kind, compassionate, or whatever. And then, and then it's, well, how do we actually turn that into a reality?
Yeah,
I really love that.
But I don't just subscribe to one thing. I'm a believer in, like, read a book on, the Tao and Buddhism and all that. And, if 95% of it doesn't really correlate with you, then that's fine. But if you get 5% that does,
No, I like that. So it gives you that why. It's like traveling, isn't it? If you keep going to the same country over and over, then that's interesting, but you get a very different mindset if you travel to lots of different countries. And it's the same with books. If you just keep reading the same book or the same, then you become very focused. Whereas to really, I think, strengthen and open your mind, it's good to expose yourself to a lot of different ideas, a lot of different concepts, and look for the connections, because many of these ancient philosophies, they use different words, different language, but there are some core principles about being a good human that they all have in common. So Alan, I'd love to talk to you, because you mentioned Buddhism, and I know you've done some really interesting. I'd love to talk more about that, but we're going to have to save that for a future episode. Where can people find out about the app and find out more about you?
Well, I guess there's so about me, there's my LinkedIn page, and I also have
so it's Alan
a blog that
Alan Cox, COX.
And I also have a blog, alancox.me. I have a website, alancox.me. I haven't got a whole lot on there, but it's got a bit more about my story. So you can connect with me there. The app is, so if you want to find out about the app, there's the website, akimbo.life, so akimbo.life. But you can just literally go straight to your app store now and download it for free. There's because we are a social enterprise, one of our core principles is that we didn't want money to be a barrier to well-being. So there's a comprehensive free content in there. So it's not like one of these try it for so many days and then you're out kind of thing. There's plenty on there for you for free.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me acknowledge you, Alan, for the amazing work that you've done. Thank you for spending time with us and sharing your story. I'm sorry you've gone through such challenges, but I think your story really brings to life something I say often, is that on the other side of adversity is growth. And it's just when you're in those dark moments, it's good to remember that, because you know that things will get better. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and your story is certainly testament to that. So thank you for spending time with us, and we'll see you next time. And thank you everyone for your attention, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.